Hi guys, it's Leah. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new, and welcome to Bookmas Day 2. Today is an incredibly excited video because we are going to be going through 40 plus books that are being published in 2026 that are on my radar, and I think they should be on yours too. If you're not new here, you may not know that I read from absolutely every single genre. I love every single genre, from literary fiction to classics to fantasy to horror to romance. I really do read a little bit of everything, so these 40 plus books that are publishing in 2026 also reflect that. We have literally recommendations from every single genre possible. So I am really hopeful that by watching this video you at least get one book on your radar for 2026. I am going to be going in chronological order, like I said, because there are just so many different genres. I feel like it makes the most sense to go in what is being published first. So yeah, feel free to go grab your favorite drink or a snack. This video feels like it might be a long one. I have a fresh cup of tea here, so I am ready to yap about all of the books that I'm excited about publishing in 2026. First and foremost then, we have a couple of books that I am excited about that are being published in January, with the first being Half His Age by Jeanette McCurdy. This book is being published on the 20th of January, so pretty far into the month, but I am so excited about it. This is going to be Jeanette McCurdy's first ever fiction release. Obviously, she had a non-fiction release, I want to say about 2 years ago, I'm Glad My Mum Died, and that was viral. So many people adored it. I also really liked it, and a literary fiction from her, I literally cannot wait. Just to note, I do have my laptop here with all of the books on them, so I may be reading from some synopses, but Half His Age, I feel like I am expecting this to be slightly humorous, but mainly delving deeper into more imperative topics like age gap. Very much exploring the dynamics of that, and I'm so intrigued by it. I just feel like it's going to be so good. So that is the first book that I have to note that is being published in 2026. And the only other book that I did note down for January is The Bloody Branch by Bridget Lowe. I actually got sent about 2 days ago a physical proof copy of this already, so I'm incredibly excited to read it. It just looks like it's going to be so dark and gothic and delicious. Literally all I know about this one is that it has been categorized as horror, and I believe it is following 3 heroines based on Celtic mythology. I really want to read more surrounding Celtic mythology, especially in the horror and fantasy space, because I feel like it's just something that I'm going to adore. I'm really hoping that this is going to be quite poignant and poetic and just so lyrically beautiful. I have hopes. I feel like I am going to read it very soon. I do want to read it in January, but probably in the beginning of the month. Next, going on to a lot of books that are being published in February. February is going to be such a good month for book releases, but first and foremost we have The Lies That Summon the Night by Tessonja Adet, and this is being published on the 3rd. Now that this year I feel like I've really established what I do like in the fantasy space, in 2026 I really want to hone down on some new favorite fantasies, and this one has potential. This one is a romantasy set in a world where art has basically become a deadly sin. That is so interesting. This little synopsis is very much what sold me on it. It says, Nevernight meets filthy rich vampire in this irresistibly dark romantasy set in a world where creativity and art are forbidden and humanity sins are monsters given flesh. From the author of Curse of the Wolf King, perfect for fans of Geneva Lee, Raven Kennedy and Carissa Broadbent, who I love. It just sounds so incredibly unique. It sounds like it might be a breath of fresh air, especially to do with the magic system. Like, art being a forbidden force actually really intrigues me. I've never read anything from this author before, so I don't know how I'm going to gel with their writing style or anything like that, but based on the synopsis, I'm sold, and I will be reading it in February. Next is a book that, guys, I'm not going to lie, I found on a complete whim, and I don't even know what it is about. I'm assuming this is real. Making this list of books that I'm really excited about in 2026, I was kind of going through all of the books that I've loved in the past year and seeing if they also have one coming up. And babe, when I clicked on Lane Fargo, there is a book called Ice Lovers, and it says it's being published on the 4th of Feb. News to me. Like I said, on Goodreads this has absolutely no synopsis, it has no cover. I don't know anything about this, but Ice Lovers, in my head, babe, when I think about that, I think a romance book with ice skaters. I really don't know if I've struck gold here on a complete whim and I've just randomly found it and then it's going to be announced and it's going to be massive, or what, but I saw it and I had to include it because I don't know if it is a real thing. Then it's definitely one that I will be reading the second that it is published. I love Lane Fargo's writing. I loved The Favourite so much, it was a 5-star from me, and anything that she does publish in the future, I will be there to read it. So like I said, this hasn't got a synopsis, this hasn't got a cover as far as I've seen so far when I'm filming this, but the 4th of Feb, who knows, maybe that is real, maybe not. Next up on the 12th, we have a book called She Made Herself a Monster by Anna Kovačeva. First and foremost, I am so obsessed with this cover. It screams gothic, it seems poetry, it screams gonna become a favorite book. I really don't know too much about this one. The second that I found it, I knew it was one that I kind of wanted to go in with very little expectation, nor really knowing anything about the plot, but I believe it's a vampire story. I believe that it's steeped in folklore, and I also believe that it's quite historical fiction-esque, and I really want to delve more into historical fictions in 2026. 2026. Definitely a side note and a call out if anyone has any good historical fiction books that you think are really quite good if you're a beginner in that genre. I have read a handful before, but I definitely haven't read enough to say that I'm quite well versed in the genre, so if anyone just has any good historical fiction recommendations, please let me know. But this one I definitely want to go into as blind as possible. However, somebody has blurbed it as, and when I read this, my jaw was on the floor. I genuinely feel like just based on this, it could be a 5-star. Like, that's quite crazy to say considering I don't really know the plot of this book, but they blurbed it as poetic, visceral, dark. Kuvachiva captures the monstrous in both the mythical and the mundane. A terrifying read that will leave you looking over your shoulder long after you've finished reading. Oh my god, I need it right now. Also on the 12th of February is one of my most anticipated books of the entirety of 2026, and that is A Dark Forgetting by Kristen Cicerelli. I love Kristen Cicerelli so much. The Crimson Moth duology, actually Godstar fantasy series for me. Gideon changed my life. The Rebel Witch was also my first 5-star of the year, so who knows, maybe The Dark Forgetting will be my first 5-star of the year, but I don't really know anything about this. I want to go into it blind. I do believe that it is set in the same world as Crimson Moth, but I don't think it's got anything to do with any of the characters or the plot or anything like that, and that just really intrigues me. I have been craving another book from her for the longest time. I know I gel well with her writing style. I love the way she writes fantasy atmosphere, world building, but also perfectly blends tension in a romance subplot. I'm so excited for this book, another one that I will be reading the second it is out. On the 19th of February, we then have Nowhere Burning by Katrina Ward. I have read one book by this author before, that was The Last House on Needless Street, and I really liked it. I really do want to read more from her. However, this one sounds like it could be perfect for me. I don't know anything about it other than I've seen it is set in the mountains, and fans of Yellow Jackets will probably like it. I don't know all that much about what that means. However, I know that she writes adult thrillers. Sometimes they also blur the horrorscape, and I love that intertwining so much. I think she does it perfectly. In The Last House on Needless Street, the way that she wrote characters too was phenomenal. Atmosphere phenomenal. I sat there and I binge read that book essentially in one sitting, and I'm not gonna lie, if it's anything like Yellow Jackets, set in the mountains, horror, thriller, I know I'm also gonna binge read it. So this one is also one I'm very excited about. In a very different tone, in a very different genre, on the 26th we have And Now Back to You by B.K. Borison. First Time Caller was definitely one of my favorite romance books of the entire year. I love the way that she writes so much, and of course this is the sequel to that. I do believe that they are interconnected standalone, so if you haven't read First Time Caller, you can probably go into this. However, just read First Time Caller anyway if you haven't, because it's so good. The way that she writes tension and the way that she writes characters, she just does that perfect blending of really fun, thrilling romance, but simultaneously blends it with heavier topics and more imperative conversations. Those romances always hit the most for me, and she just does it so well. So this one, again, very excited about. And lastly, for February, also coming out on the 26th, we have All We Have Is Time by Amy Tordor. When I found this book, my jaw was on the floor because it sounds so perfect for me. It is a fantasy read, but also leaning more historical fiction. Again, another historical fiction. I don't know why I'm really craving that at the minute. Like I said, now that I've read a little bit more fantasy, one thing that I'm really learning in that genre is that I love a time travel element. I love time travel in books anyway, especially in literary fiction, magical realism. However, I feel like in a fantasy book, and especially one that leans a little bit more historical fiction, there is so much that you can do with it, and they always break my heart. And the synopsis for this one is a sweeping historical romance perfect for fans of The Time Traveler's Wife and also The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Tordor's time-twisting debut sees an immortal woman and a man not destined to be born for another 4 centuries enjoy an impossible love affair through the ages. It sounds perfect for me. I find fantasies like that so incredibly immersive, so hopefully another one that I will binge read, another one that I'll get to as soon as it's published. Now going into March, we have a book kicking off on the 3rd, and that is No Matter What by Cara Bastone. First and foremost, I am so obsessed with these book covers. I think that these book covers are just literally the most perfect thing in the romance space. I have only read Ready or Not by her. I really want to read, what is the other one? The orange one, when they're on the boat. I haven't read that one yet. However, I really want to. I'll probably just wait until summer next year now. I believe it is a second chance romance, and I believe it is set a year after they have split up once they have experienced a very traumatic car accident. Oh, and as much as I also think it's second chance romance, I also believe it is best friend's brother. I'm just so intrigued by it. I'm so excited. I know I love her writing style so much. Again, she's a romance author that really works for me, so incredibly excited about this one. Another one I will be binge reading the day it is published. Then on the 17th of March, we have Inamorata by Ava Reid. I am excited about this one. I have loved A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid, but I really did not like Lady Macbeth, so I'm intrigued to see how I like this one. Based on the cover alone, it looks incredibly gothic, it looks incredibly dark academia, and a dark academia fantasy romance is really what I've been gravitating towards at the minute. I really don't know what to expect from it. Like I said, I've loved her writing before and I haven't loved her writing before, so I feel like it is one that I might wait a little bit to see if people are enjoying it. However, based on the synopsis of this one, I feel like if I'm ever gonna like an Ava Reid book again, surely it has to be this one. Also to note, this is a first book in a new duology from her, and the synopsis reads: a visionary and atmospheric gothic fantasy about necromancy, vengeance, and soul-consuming love. Buzzwords, that sounds insane. Then on the 19th, we have a book called The Soul Catchers by Naoko Higashi. I love translated fiction so much. I feel like so many of my favorite books of all time fall into translated fiction. However, when it comes to like cozy translated fiction, I don't always gel well with it. I don't really know where it came from. I think maybe because Before the Coffee Gets Cold got so incredibly popular and started this cozy translated fiction movement. I never really picked them up because some of the ones that I had read when I was a bookseller, I wasn't the biggest fan of. However, this one sounds like a bit of me. This one sounds beautiful. It says, perfect reading for fans of Before the Coffee Gets Cold. Higashi's gently uplifting novel posits a world where souls of the departed can inhabit inanimate objects in order to be reunited with their loved ones. It sounds absolutely perfect. I think especially for me because I love vintage artifacts, objects, I love antiques, I love knowing the history and the stories of them and the people that had them before. I feel like I'm gonna fall in love with this. It does also say, in a world where souls linger restlessly around after death, unwilling to depart, The Soul Catchers is a comforting, witty and surprisingly sensual take on the Japanese folk belief that objects can be inhabited by human presences. Utterly charming and feel good, Higashi's classic is an original exploration of our eternal reluctance to let go. I feel like it's going to be beautiful, poetic. I'm going to cry 100%. The cover too, I'm in love with. On the 24th, we then have a short story collection called Seasons of Glass and Iron by Amal Mota. And this one, again, I'm incredibly excited for. I don't know how I'm going to feel about this because I often don't gel well with certain short story collections. I know I love their writing style so much and I desperately want to read more and more books from them, especially I feel like with short stories because we haven't had too many things from them as an individual writer. This is surely just going to be an incredible way to see how I like their short story collections. I'm very hopeful about this. Also the cover, again, I'm obsessed with it. On the 26th, we then have Celestial Lights by Cecile Pin. I have read one book by Cecile Pin before and that was Wandering Souls, and it was one of the most beautiful pieces of literary fiction that I've ever read. I think the way that she writes about humanity and connections, that book specifically was about immigration. I would highly urge everyone to read it. I know for a fact this is going to be so incredibly moving, especially because it's about space and it's about astronauts. I never really felt all that interested in reading books about astronauts. However, after reading Atmosphere this year and Orbital last year, I'm very intrigued by it. I love discussions about space anyway, especially when it delves into the more philosophical discussions, and I feel like Cecile Pin is definitely going to be that. I know it's going to be heartbreaking and I know it's going to make me cry, and I've been eagerly awaiting another book by Cecile Pin because genuinely one of the best literary fiction writers I've read in so long. I feel like she's really a voice to watch. I also feel like after so many people loved Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid, I hope that this directs them into Cecile Pin's direction. If you loved Atmosphere, definitely add this one to your radar. Honestly, I'm expecting jaw-dropping 5-star things. Very excited for that one. And then ending up March, on the very last day of the month, the 31st, we of course have The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez. I already know that this is on absolutely every single person's radar for 2026. Everybody loves Abby Jimenez, and rightfully so. Evidently for me and so many other people, she is a romance author that really works. I feel like, again, the way that she balances humor and tension-filled and spicy scenes, but simultaneously those heavier topics and imperative conversations, I think especially when it comes down to family and grief and trauma, she does it brilliantly. Very excited about this. I'm genuinely going to be reading every single thing that she ever releases from now on, so just another one to add to the list. Going into April, on the 2nd of the month, we have Permanence by Sophie McIntosh. I have only read one book by Sophie McIntosh before, that was Cursed Red, and I loved it so much. I think her writing style, again, she's definitely a voice to watch. This one seems really interesting because we are following, I believe, adulterers who are set off from the world. However, they do all of their adultery with no shame and no guilt and anything like that, but I believe they are separate from everyone else, and that just sounds so interesting. It does also say that this is a thrillingly erotic and sharply relatable portrait of longing and obsession, intimacy and betrayal, possession and dispossession. Honestly, with every single synopsis from her that I read, there are so many buzzwords, especially when I read literary fiction, that I love exploring the discussions of, and I just know that this one is going to be brilliant. So another one that I'm very excited about for literary fiction specifically. Next up, we finally have another thriller, and this is being published on the 7th, and this is The Ending Writes Itself by Evelyn Clark. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Evelyn Clark is actually two authors, and that is Kat Clark and V. Schwab. I have never read anything from Kat Clark before, so I don't know what their writing style is like, but V. Schwab writing a thriller, I'm so intrigued. I have high hopes that I'm really gonna love it because obviously naturally I love V. Schwab's writing, but because it's Kat Clark also, I'm intrigued to see how they write together. I don't know, I feel like this is a book that a lot of people are going to be talking about next year. I feel like it's really gonna have its moment because obviously V. Schwab, but I'm very intrigued, so that one is definitely one to add to your list. Next, if you're not new here, you would know how much I love Fitzcarraldo editions, and on the 9th there is a new book coming out, and that is called What Am I, a Deer by Polly Barton. Again, I very much randomly stumbled across this one, and because of how much I love Fitzcarraldo editions, I know that this is probably going to be one that I'm going to become obsessed with. I just know it to my core. Genuinely, this sounds absolutely perfect for me, and I know so many other people who love literary fiction and translated fiction would adore this. It says, it's an exquisitely written and dynamic novel about the existential angst of modern life. As a woman seeking reinvention embarks on a year-long obsession with an alluring stranger and thrilling karaoke night. I really just feel like, for me personally, I'm always trying to venture out in seeking literary fiction and also translated fiction that really discusses modern life and also being a woman in your 20s, kind of the confrontation of that and the ugliness of that and the journey of that. And I feel like this is going to be one in that sort of sphere, so very excited for that one. Another one I will be reading the day it is published. Next, we actually have a book on my birthday that is being published, and that is These Familiar Walls by CJ Dotson. I believe that this is a horror slash mystery thriller, and again, I love the intertwining of those two genres. I feel like they are so perfect to binge read, especially when they come a little bit more poetic. All I know about this one, because again, I do want to go into it incredibly blind, is at the top of Goodreads it says, a spine-chilling, heart-pounding suburban horror novel at the heart of the genre, perfect for fans of T. Kingfisher, Cassandra Q, and Katrina Ward. How interesting. I believe it is also a haunted house novel, and I love haunted house novels, and like I said, it's being published on my birthday, so I feel like I'm kind of being drawn to read it. And lastly, for April, we have another horror novel that is being published on the 21st, and that is Edessa by Gabrielle Scher. Again, another one that I didn't read that much of the synopsis for, because I love going into horror novels like this knowing as little as possible. But again, on the Goodreads note, it says, in a powerfully imagined Russia at the height of the pogroms, a grief-stricken family turned to ancient magic to bring their daughter back from the grave. When I first read that, the first thing that I thought of was Monstrilio. I feel like that is so incredibly different to what this is going to be. However, it seems quite gothic. It just sounds quite historical. I just know I'm going to love it. So another one being published in April, another horror, no less, that I will be reading. Going into May, we have a book that is being published on the 5th, and that is Accumulation by Amy Pokłacka. First and foremost, again, this cover is so gorgeous. I love this style of horror or literary fiction so much. This one sounds so incredibly intriguing. Again, I believe it is another haunted house novel, and we are following a woman who was a filmmaker turned housewife. Like, this is really going to touch upon the horror and the terror of a domesticated life, perhaps her being a housewife when all she wanted to do was strive to become a filmmaker. I love stories like that so much, especially when we are following the perspective of a woman, and I just feel like this is going to be jaw-dropping. Is the house haunted, or is it actually her haunting herself? Is it her narrative haunting herself? Love it. I'm very excited to read this. Next up, on the 7th of May, this one feels a little bit rogue in comparison to all of the other books, but that is a book by Maureen Johnson, and that is The Velvet Knife. This is another installment in the Truly Devious series. Truly Devious was one of the main series that got me back into reading. It is a young adult sort of murder mystery, but also very dark academia series, and I loved it so much. However, the last book that I read from Maureen Johnson, babe, I really disliked. I don't know, obviously now because I'm naturally older, I'm just not going to gel with the writing style. I'm a little bit nervous, but because of how much I loved Truly Devious and that entire series, for the nostalgia, I will be reading it. So I added that to the list. Very rogue. I feel like it's probably one of the only YA books on here. However, like I said, for nostalgia purposes, I definitely will be reading it, and hopefully I will like it. On the 21st of May, we have The Book of Guilt by Catherine Chidgey. I don't believe I've ever read anything from this author before. However, she's a literary fiction slash horror author who I feel like I'm gonna love. I don't really know too much about this one. Again, it's another one that the synopsis, I didn't really want to know too much before going into it, but I believe we are following 3 different mothers, and it's quite a utopian society. I am always looking for more dystopian and utopian fiction. I find it so interesting. I find it so immersive and so atmospheric, and I feel like this is going to be such a good one. I know that this author is so incredibly beloved, so maybe I will read something from her before going on to this one, but this one is definitely a literary fiction on my radar for 2026. For June, on the 2nd, we have a book being published called The Children by Melissa Albert. It says it is a novel in which the estranged adult children of a legendary author, written into their dead mother's beloved fantasy series, contend with the vine-like creep of legacy, memory, and magic. All I know about this is that their mother wrote them into her fantasy series. I don't really know what to expect. With the very bottom of the blurb, the children whispers to you from the hallway outside your bedroom, lights flickering as you turn the pages of a book that didn't seem so scary a moment ago. It's a story for anyone who's ever revisited an old favourite and found it cast in a darker light. The lines separating magic and memory blurring as the gap widens between the authors we imagined and the people they turn out to be. Are you joking? It actually sounds like it could again become a favourite. Another fantasy being published on the 2nd is The Unicorn Hunters by Catherine Arden. Another one that sounds quite historical fiction. It is set in Brittany, and that really intrigues me. Like I said, I'm really intrigued in more Celtic folklore and anything historical, especially in the fantasy space, and I feel like this is going to be a perfect one for that. On the 9th, another fantasy novel. This month is full of fantasy books. This one is Letters from the Last Apothecary by Bita Pizzardi. The main reason when I saw this I knew I had to add it to this list is because it has been pitched as Emily Wilde meets Divine Rivals in this light romantic fantasy about a grumpy apothecary. Guys, it is set against the smog-choked skyline of Tresport inside a lush green sanctuary of plants and old magics. This is a story of mistaken identity, reluctant partnership, and the quiet magic of being truly seen on and off the page. Like I said, I feel like this month and that summer is going to be so full of so many amazing fantasy books, and this one is another one up there that I will be reading. Like I said, as we carry on with the fantasies in June, we also have Light Wielder by Rachel Snyder. This is being published on the 11th, and of course it is the sequel to Metal Slinger. I am so intrigued by this. I know absolutely everyone for the most part adored Metal Slinger this year. It was that fantasy or a romantasy book that truly everyone was gagged by the ending. I did really like it. It definitely wasn't a favourite romantasy that I read in 2025. However, I will be finishing the sequel, especially because I do believe it is only a duology. I am so intrigued to see what happens in the sequel based on the ending of the first book, and based on that ending, I do feel like I will prefer this one. So another one that I feel like is going to be everywhere in June. And then lastly for June, on the 23rd, we have another Ashley Poston book. That is The Somewhere Garden. I am so excited because I love Ashley Poston so much. Actually, at the time of filming this, I never got around to reading This Sounds Like Love, which was her 2025 release. However, she's a romance author that I feel like is so unique. The way that she blends romance and magical realism really works for me, and this one I hope is no different. Actually, when looking at this book at the time when we filmed this, I cannot find a synopsis anywhere, so I don't really know what it is about. I'm assuming maybe some magical sort of garden, but I'm excited nonetheless. Okay, going into July, we kick things off on the 2nd of the month with Heartstopper Volume 6 by Alice Oseman. I feel like this is again going to be everywhere in the summer. I feel like everyone's going to be talking about this. It is the finalization of the Heartstopper series. That feels absolutely crazy to say because I remember starting reading them when I was literally, oh my god, I don't even know how old I was, but what, at least 5 years ago, which is crazy. I love the series so much, just like everybody else. I'm very excited for it to finish and for me to read it. On the 7th, we have another book that again has such high potential to become one of my favorite books of 2026. I feel like that is such a bold statement to make, but based on the synopsis alone, it is called Solace House by Will McLean. Another one that I am completely obsessed with the cover. But guys, when I say it comes down to the synopsis, listen to this. A wildly imaginative firework of a novel that is nigh on uncategorizable. I love things that blur genres. Solace House sees a group of students discover the possibility of another realm lying parallel to our own after clearing out a reclusive hoarder's former residence. I can't with that. It's blending time travel, it's blending parallel universes, seeming a little bit horror, maybe dark academia. Oh my god, I'm obsessed with it already. Apart from that, I don't want to know anything going into it, but I will be reading it the second it is published, and I will be buying a hard copy of it because that cover, I hope and I pray that this is the cover in the UK because it's beautiful. And then lastly, on the 16th, we have The Lion and the Deathless Dark by Carissa Broadbent. Again, at the time when we filming this, I actually haven't read the book prior to this in this series. However, I love Carissa Broadbent so much. She is one of my favorite fantasy authors. The Serpent in the Wings of Night series is one of my favorites ever. I'm very intrigued because I actually don't know who this one is following. If you're not familiar with the series, it is essentially 3 sets of duologies, and this I believe is the beginning of the last duology. So I don't know who we're following, but I'm very excited. I love her writing. I will be reading it. Okay, we have 5 more books that I'm excited to read in 2026. We have 2 for August and 3 for September, and none for October, November or December. Obviously for the latter half of the year, there are so many books that get published at the beginning of 2026 that will be published then, and so on and so forth. So we only have 5 more left. And so going into August, on the 4th of the month, we have Meet Me in the Garden by Nina LaCour. When I saw this, I was so incredibly excited because I feel like Nina LaCour is one of those classic OG booktube authors, and I am just so excited to see what she does now. This one is a historical fiction, however, it sounds as beautiful as ever. I'm so excited. This cover too, I'm praying we can get hold of this one in the UK again. The synopsis of this one reads, profound and expansive, a story of love and longing, art and motherhood, friendship and desire. Meet Me in the Garden is a decade-spanning tour de force inspired by the author's family and tracing the history of the Great Migration. Like I said, 2026, I really want to get into more historical fiction, whether that's in fantasy or just straight historical fiction. This does fall into the historical fiction category. However, I am expecting this to be so incredibly beautiful. It sounds so poetic. It sounds like honestly one that might break my heart. So that one is adding to my list for August. I'm very excited for that. On the 11th, we have a horror short story called A Plagued Sea, and that one is by Kim Bo-young, and this one is translated also. I found this one randomly on Goodreads and it sounds so good, and I love a good horror short story just to binge read in one sitting, especially in the latter half of the year. They're so atmospheric. This book is set in an abandoned seaside village in Korea where essentially a plague broke out and it turns its victims into like sea monsters. I don't really know anything other than that because it is so short too. I believe it's about 144 pages. I don't really want to know anything else. It just sounds so different to everything else I have on this list and everything else I'm currently gravitating towards, and quite unique in the horror space. So that is one that, again, I will be reading in August. And then lastly, the last 3 books that are being published in September. We kick things off with the first of the month with, of course, The Knave and the Moon by Rachel Gillig. I am so excited for this book. This is absolutely one of my most high anticipated books of 2026. Of course, this is the sequel of The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig, and I loved this book so much. I think I am just gonna rate it 5-star, honestly, let's be real. I did originally rate it a 4.75, however, it is a fantasy book that I've never been able to stop thinking about, and I read it in, I wanna say I read it in August. I loved it so much. I loved the gothicness of it. I loved the tension with the romance. I loved the found family element, and it made me nearly cry at the end. So I'm begging for the sequel. I will absolutely be reading it the second that it comes out. On the 15th of September, we have Thoughts Be Bloody by Auden Patrick. This one I feel like is going to be perfect for September and so great for fans of If We Were Villains. It is a dark academia novel. It is a queer novel, and it just sounds so good. It is essentially a queer trans retelling of Hamlet. I feel like everyone's going to eat that up. It looks so beautiful. The cover looks gorgeous. I just feel like it's going to be so beautiful, and I really don't want to know anything else other than that, because obviously Hamlet, I've never actually read Hamlet before, but I definitely want to, especially after loving Hamnet this year. I'm always venturing to find more dark academia novels, and this one is definitely one on my radar for 2026. And then lastly, the last book that I have on my radar for 2026 so far is, again, one of my most anticipated ones. But in saying that, I know the least about this one than I do anything else, because there's not a cover, there isn't a synopsis. I have no idea what to expect with this book, but it is The Thief and the Traitor Bride by V.L. Bovalino. V.L. Bovalino obviously wrote The Second Death of Locke, and that is arguably my #1 favorite fantasy book that I have read all year. I absolutely adored it. It was medieval, it was slightly gothic in some ways. It was one of the most beautiful love stories I've ever read in my entire life, and on Goodreads it says that it is going to be a trilogy. I'm really intrigued to see how they all blend together, because that one definitely could be read as a standalone. However, this one looks like it's the second book being published, but again, no synopsis at all. There is no cover, but babe, I loved The Second Death of Locke so much that you bet I will be reading absolutely anything that they publish next, especially if it is in the same series. So that, again, one of my most anticipated books of 2026, but it's also the one that I know the least about. But yeah, guys, those were all of the books on my radar to read in 2026. I hope in this video you at least got one book that you are excited to read that you didn't know of prior. I cannot wait for all of these. I'm very intrigued to see, maybe at the end of 2026 I'll react to this and see if I did end up reading all of them. With that being said, of course, if there are any books on your radar that you are so incredibly excited for that I didn't mention in this video, or even if I did mention them, please let me know down in the comments. I'm always looking for more books to add to my radar. I feel like 2026 is going to be such an incredible year for book releases. Or if you want to show you stayed until the very end of the video and you don't know what to comment any Christmas emoji, of course. As always too, down in the description box below you can find all of my socials. There you'll find my Patreon, where we have my book club. There's exclusive access, exclusive videos. We have a Discord chat. I do live shows, live reading sprints. There is always a lot of fun stuff happening over there. But simultaneously, of course, you can find my Instagram, my TikTok, my Goodreads, my Fable, and so much more. If this is also your first video that you are ever seeing from me and you did enjoy it, it would mean the absolute world if you stuck around and considered subscribing. I suppose especially because we are only on day 2 of Bookmas. We have 10 videos yet to come in December. I'm so excited for you guys to see them, so I would love for you to be here for them. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching and for spending some time with me today. I really hope you enjoyed, and I will see you again very, very soon with another video.